Page number 273. Maxim is generally ಯಾರು ಅಡುಗೆ ಮನೇಲಿ ಇರ್ತಾರಲ್ಲ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್. ಸರಿ ಸರಿ ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋಣ. Be happy to eat in constant divine thought whatever you get, with due regard to honest and pious earnings. The philosophy involved in it starts from materiality and ends in the final state we have to arrive at. So it encompasses the entire spectrum of our journey. From the stage that we start in spirituality to the highest state of reality, that entire journey. This principle is something that's going to be useful or beneficial. A happy disposition is a state which percolates its effect upon the lower layers and purifies it. So happy disposition is a state which percolates its effect down to the lower layers and purifies them. This is the state which may aptly be taken as just next to the divinity. So you should be in a happy disposition state of mind. ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತು, ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಜಾಯ್ಫುಲ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಯಾಕೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ದ ರೀಸನ್. ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಟು ಡಿವಿನಿಟಿ. ಸೊ ಜನರಲಿ ನೆನ್ನೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಿದ್ದಲ್ಲ ಗೋಪಾಲ್ ಕೃಷ್ಣ, ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಟೆಲ್ ವಾಟ್ ಆರ್ ದ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ದಟ್ ಯು ನೋ ದಟ್ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಎ ಕೈಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಎ ಸ್ಪಿರಿಚುವಲ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಅಂತ ಹೆಂಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ?
Joyful, accepting.
You should talk louder.
Joyful, accepting, ಮತ್ತೆ there was
Accepting ಅಲ್ಲ, ಬೇರೆ ಏನೋ ಹೇಳಿದೆ. ಐ ಟೋಲ್ಡ್ ಯು 4 things. ಜಾಯ್ಫುಲ್ ಒಂದು ಕರೆಕ್ಟು. ಆಮೇಲೆ
humility,
one, you should feel joyful. Second one, internally you should feel light and settled. And the atmosphere should be free flowing. ತಿಳಿಯಾಗಿರ್ಬೇಕು, ತಿಳಿ ನೀರು ಥರ. When you see these 3 things manifesting at once, you can know that you are in a spiritual state, in a spiritual condition, or in a spiritual atmosphere. When you are in a spiritual atmosphere, you will feel joyful, your heart will be very light and settled, and thirdly, you will feel that the entire atmosphere is free flowing. ತಿಳಿಯಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ. ತಿಳಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಲೈಕ್ ದ ಎಂಟೈರ್ ಅಟ್ಮಾಸ್ಫಿಯರ್ ಇಸ್ ವೆರಿ ಸಟಲ್. Okay, that's what you should look out for. You can actually compare the normal atmosphere that we have in the house to what happens when you go to the atmosphere in the ashram or some other place where you are engrossed spiritually. These are the things that you are able to pick up. Generally, in a spiritual atmosphere, you are more likely to be easily joyful. Second is that you will be feeling light and settled inside. And thirdly, the atmosphere will be very subtle. It's free flowing and subtle. That is what you should look out for. If these 3, 4 are there, automatically when these 4 are there, the mind is not pestered by anything. The mind is not bothered by any thoughts or any plans, nothing of that kind. It is just natural. In other words, the mind is very simple at that state. What is the quintessence of nature? 4th maxim.
simplicity.
Simplicity. So when you are in that state, the mind is quietened down naturally without any effort. So you are then established in a state of simplicity. You remember, I keep telling you, if you are becoming more spiritual, you should feel that life is becoming easier to lead. It's becoming simple to lead. There is no difficulty in life at all. Everything appears very simple. To pass through life simply. Just look at a small child. Does it think about, array, what am I supposed to do the whole day? It just passes through the life in a very simple way, in a simple state, without any overheads, right? So, just we have a lot of things to learn just by observing children. Even if something catches hold of the child, suppose yesterday there was a child which came to the hospital with its mother, 2.5 years old. It was pestering its mother for ice cream. Now, how long do you think that the child is going to pester the mother for ice cream? Maybe for a few minutes till it gets diverted. In other words, even if it's kind of pestering the mother for ice cream, it's not something that's going to create a deep impression because it doesn't hold on to. It can easily forget and move on. That is what happens. Okay. So they're all signs. How easily you can let go is another sign of spirituality. How easily you can accept new ideas which are totally in contrast to what you have in your mind. That's again the sign of spirituality. Okay. So anyway, Babuji is writing just a happy disposition actually percolates its effect on the lower layers and purifies them. Now you see why it is important to be happy. You cannot be serious all the time. Because if you are serious all the time, you are actually building more and more samskaras. You are not allowing the samskaras to get purified at all. Fixing our thought on it means taking into account that which is our final goal. What is our final goal? Reality is our final goal. So when we fix our thought on the reality, which is what is reality, is nothing but the peak of divinity. When we fix our thought on reality, which is the peak of divinity, we begin from the point beyond which remains that alone. So, at the peak of divinity, there is reality. So, when we start with the thought of divinity with whatever we eat, then the next to that is reality only. It's very easy to catch hold of reality. When you catch hold of divinity, next to that is reality. So, reality is nothing but the peak of divinity. So, fixing our thought on it, which is divinity, means taking into account that which is our final goal. The final goal is reality. In other words, we begin from the point beyond which remains that alone. What remains beyond the divinity? Reality. So we are taking a huge step towards the reality by aligning the divine thoughts with the food that we take. Okay. This is the warp and woof which has been interwoven by nature itself. Warp and woof and anybody wants to comment about what is it? This is a kind of colloquial English. Warp and woof means this is the very essence. Warp and woof means essence. This is the very essence which has been interwoven by nature itself. In other words, this is a essence. It is interwoven by nature as a secret, and it's available everywhere. Anybody can use it, make use of it, because this essence is available everywhere by nature itself. We may call it as the material aspect of nature, though materiality be only for namesake, which reveals the nature of the real being. Compared to reality, divinity is material. That's what he's talking about. Compared to reality, which is even more finer state, reality is more grosser. That's why he used the word materiality. Okay. And then he says, though materiality be name only taken for namesake. So it's not materiality in materiality terms, but materiality in contrast to reality. Divinity is more material in nature. Does it make sense? The word materiality is used for it only because, after all, it comes into the human conception. So, reality is something which is beyond human conception. Anything which comes under human conception can be called as material. That's the meaning with which he is used the word materiality here. Possibly, men may misunderstand it as a wheel of Maya, but that would not be correct. This is in fact the state which pervades the entire sphere of Maya. Now the question is, what pervades the entire sphere of Maya? He said that this is in fact the state which pervades the entire sphere of Maya. So now the question is, what is that entire sphere of the Maya?
Materiality.
You are now playing with words and everything. This is called as playing with words. There is a clue there. We may call it a material aspect of nature. And he says that the nature itself has interwoven this everywhere. So, what he's now talking about, the entire sphere of Maya, is the sphere of nature. And now tell me, where does the nature extend from? To where?
From the first mind until materiality.
Until the lowest level. And where is the first mind?
Kshob. It's
Hmm.
the Kshob.
Good. So, from the show down on, everything is in the realm of the nature or Maya. That you might be surprised when we say that. Why is that? There are four levels of Maya that we have spoken about. What are the four levels of Maya?
ಮಾಯಾ ಮಹಾಮಾಯ ಆದಿಮಾಯ ಮೂರು ಗೊತ್ತು
Good,
ಇನ್ನೊಂದು
good. But Maya is divided into two. Mahamaya, Adimaya is correct. Maya itself has two components. One in the Pinda Pradesh and one in the higher region. What is one in the Pinda Pradesh? What is one in the higher region?
ಮಾಯಾ ಮಹಾಮಾಯ
Mahamaya is beyond that. Maya itself has two components, two stages, and then the Mahamaya, then the Adimaya. We have discussed it some point of time. So the Pinda Pradesh Maya is called as gross Maya. Then you have the subtle Maya. Then you have got the Adi Maya. Sorry, Mahamaya, third one. Lastly, you have got the Adi Maya. So four stages of Maya. And as we go higher and higher from the gross Maya to the Adi Maya, it becomes more subtler and subtler. Does it make sense? So four levels of Maya. Adi means first one. Adi Maya, first level of Maya. Then Mahamaya, second level. Then subtle Maya, third level. Then the gross Maya, which is the fourth level, which is where we are at most of the time, the Pinda Pradesh. Okay. So this is in fact the state which pervades the entire sphere of Maya, means from the first mind of God down to the lowest level of creation. That entire sphere. Now we fix it up in our thought at the time of taking our food so that the effect filters down onto the substance which is there. So we have the thought of the divinity, and when we have the thought of the divinity, that effect pervades down into the substance that is there. When we eat it, the effect taken in by it enters our body and begins to spread all through our arteries and veins. In other words, we have utilized it to the best purpose, the thing which we have to take it from outside. In other words, we have utilized to our best purpose the thing which we have taken in from outside. The particles and atoms of the body begin to get purified. The impulse of the thought created thereby combines with the food and helps in promoting physical and spiritual health. So, this is one technique that anybody can use. That irrespective of the kind of illness that they have got, if they eat the food that they normally eat day to day with the thought of the divine, it has a huge positive impact on all kinds of health related issues, whether it's physical health, mental health, or spiritual health. All that you have to do is eat it in the start of the divine. That's all it is. So it's a good remedy for every kind of health issues that we face. Now, this is in terms of the food that we eat. The same thing applies to the water that we take or any liquid that we take. Eat in the thought of the divine. And in fact, water has more subtle prana. The food that we eat has grosser prana and subtle prana. Water has subtle prana. And the subtle prana directly goes and purifies our entire system because 70% of our body is water. So even if you just cultivate the habit of having the thought of the divine while drinking anything, I'm not drinking, asking about drinking substances which is going to destroy our mind. So we are talking about drinking which are kind of healthy. You might be coffee, tea, green tea, herbal tea, uh, some vegetable juice, some buttermilk, lime water, normal water, all these things, any liquid. If you have that liquid in the thought of the divine, lassi, okay. So whatever liquids you like, except the madaka dravyagalu, except alcohol and other things, any other liquid, even a glass of tili saru, that's also fine. So any of these things, if you actually drink with the thought of the divine in mind, that's one of the best purifiers that we have got. Because that liquid percolates down to and mixes with all the liquid that we have got. And it starts purifying the entire system. So that's why eighth maxim is very important and many people like it because it tells them about eating, which most of us like anyway. So since it talks about eating, eighth maxim is liked by everyone, most of it. And it's easy to do, no? You don't actually have to do anything. You eat whatever you're eating, but just eat with the thought of the divine. That's all. So if somebody is interested in eating jalebi, why not? Eat jalebi with the thought of the divine. That's all. If somebody is eating, what do you say? Bakri, eat with the thought of the divine. ಅಲ್ವೇನೋ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಬಕ್ರಿ ತಿಂತೀಯಲ್ವ ದಿನಾಗಲೂ ಬಕ್ರಿ ತಿನ್ನಲ್ವಾ ನಿಮ್ ಕಡೆ ಜೋಳದ ರೊಟ್ಟಿ ತಿನ್ನಲ್ವಾ
ಓ ಅದ ಹಾ ಅದ ನಾನು ಮಟನ್
ಆ ಆ. ಬಕ್ರಿ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನಾರ್ತ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದ ಭಾಷೆನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಟನ್ ಅಲ್ಲ ಜೋಳದ ರೊಟ್ಟಿ
ರೊಟ್ಟಿ
ನೋಡು ಬಕ್ರಿಗೆ ಎರಡು ಅರ್ಥ ಉಂಟು ಒಂದು ಮಟನ್ ಆ ಬಕ್ರಿ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಜೋಳದ ರೊಟ್ಟಿ ಜೋಳದ ರೊಟ್ಟಿನ ನೀವು ತಿನ್ನೋದು ಹಾ ಮತ್ತೆ ಜೋಳದ ರೊಟ್ಟಿ ತಿಂದೇನೆ ನಿಂಗೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಕೆನೆ ಉಬ್ಬಿರೋದು ಸೊ ವಾಟ್ ಎವರ್ ಯು ಈಟ್ it doesn't matter. Eat with the thought of the divine. Now, that is a habit that we have to cultivate. This has huge benefit in terms of quickening our spiritual journey. Because see, anyway, every day, whether we like it or not, even when we on the days that we don't meditate, every day we eat at least 2 3 times. Every day at least we drink 2 3 times. Some coffee, some city, some water, something we'll be drinking every day. So if you just align the thought of the divine with the eating and the drinking, you're actually utilizing that for a very big, in a big way, you are going to increase the pace of your spiritual journey. Okay. So you have to start practicing from today only. Now, after the session is over, when people go out for the next coffee, you have to practice it. Right? Now, the next paragraph, he actually explains how it works. He's talking about prana. I spoke about the liquid having subtle prana. You remember? The liquid has subtle prana, and the solid has gross prana, the solid food. Okay? The power of prana being all pervasive, nothing is free from its influence. It is inside the food as well as outside it. We apply the push of our thought to it, which brings it to a state similar to that which causes a spark by friction, though it is somewhat different and purer. That which springs up by our contact with the reality leads us towards the supreme, the power below. The power below it is not being capable of the job. Human imagination has no access to it. This paves our way to the infinite. Thus, so much distance is covered so very easily. So essentially, what he is saying is that when we have the thought of the divine, we are utilizing the power of the prana. That is what we are utilizing to purify ourselves. Now, when the power of the prana is used, how do you actually kickstart that power of prana to work? By the thought, push of the thought. The thought that you have of the divine in the mind, that acts like a push and that ignites the prana. And that's why he's saying it's like which causes spark by friction. So the push of the thought onto the prana gives rise to friction and that ignites it. That makes it work. He's given a physical example, but he's saying that even though this example is given, what we are now talking about is a purer state. Older days, we used to have the spark plug in the bikes. You people are aware. I think many people who are not used to the bikes, they are not be aware. But people who are used to the biking and hiking, people in biking and hiking will know about the spark plug, right? ಕೇಳಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ ಭರತ್ ಸ್ಪಾರ್ಕ್ ಪ್ಲಗ್ ಕೇಳಿದ್ಯಾ ಸಿಸ್ಟರ್ಗೆ ಬರೀ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿರೋ ಸ್ಪಾರ್ಕ್ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಗೊತ್ತಿರುತ್ತೆ ಸಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಸುಧಾ ನೋಸ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಅಬೌಟ್ ದ ಸ್ಪಾರ್ಕ್ ದಟ್ ಫ್ಲೈ ಇನ್ ದ ಹೌಸ್ at all levels, both in the kitchen, outside the kitchen. Sparks flying everywhere. But spark plug ಅಂತ ಬರ್ತಿತ್ತು. Spark plug, basically it's like a friction. You remember in the olden days, how are they actually starting fire? They used to rub two stones together to create a spark. And that was what is being used to light the fire. So they used to create friction, they used to create spark by friction, by rubbing two stones. ಆಯ್ತಾ ಅದೇ ತರನೇ ಇಲ್ಲಿ when you give the push of the thought to the prana, it creates a spark. Okay, that is what he's talking about. That which springs up by our contact with reality leads towards the supreme. The power below is not being capable of the job. So in other words, when you create this particular state by having the thought of the divine, it actually pushes you towards the reality and then towards the ultimate, the supreme or the ultimate. Human imagination has no access to it. You cannot even know how it works, because these are all very occurring at a very, very subtle level. Babu just tried to give you some material examples to it. In the previous page, he's talked about materiality. Now he's talking about spark by friction. He's tried to give a material example, but he says that it is beyond human imagination. Although, just for the sake of understanding, he's given something to relate to. Okay. In other words, he's now telling you the subtlest level at which this particular process works. It works at a level which is very close towards reality. After all, what is that supreme state or the real state of reality? It is a state beyond existence or non-existence. The state is so subtle that you cannot say with certainty whether that is in existence or non. It is in a state of non-existence. And Babuji says it's beyond that also. So a state of reality, a state which is beyond the level of existence, non-existence, is called as reality. And what is there beyond that? That's the supreme. That's what he's talking about. You remember that sentence? End of spirituality, start of reality, end of reality, start of real bliss, end of real bliss, and when that awareness is also gone of the real bliss, then you have reached the destination. That is the supreme that he's talking about, where you have reached the destination beyond the real bliss. Does it make sense? So that's why he's saying that which springs up by our contact with reality. By doing this, what we are doing, we are utilizing the force of divinity to go towards the reality. Now, then what happens when we establish contact with the reality? Then something else springs up, and that takes us to the supreme. Human imagination has no access to it. This paves our way to the infinite. Thus, so much distance is covered so very easily. Otherwise, we are starting at the first point. By having this thought of the divine while eating food, we cover so much of the space. You cover almost like up to the realm of the divinity, and you are now close to the reality. Now, where is the realm of the divinity? The entire central region, from the ninth point onwards, the entire sphere is in the realm of the divinity. By having the divine thought, although we might be in the first point, we are now directly connected to the higher stages of the reality and divinity, and from there we go to reality, and then from there we go to the supreme. Does it make sense? So just by doing this one simple process, but don't think that that gives you free license to eat whatever, whenever, however much you want. Bharat will say, today Raghu brother has given me a very good, a free license, and I will utilize it left, right, center. The license. So I'll go and eat some idli vada, then I'll go and eat some bakri, then I'll go and eat masala dosa, then I'll go and eat some chats, then I'll go and have some fruit juice. No. You will only eat that much moderately that is necessary for your health. But at the same time, you are nourishing your spiritual journey also while actually being healthy. It works both ways. The more subtle you become by aligning this thought of the divine with whatever you eat, anyway, it cleans the system, it purifies the system. So your health is anyway protected. At the same time, the moderation that you are actually incorporating as a quality while eating also nourishes your health. So in both ways, you get nourished. And thirdly, now the subtle prana that you are invoking, now the prana is able to move around freely in the system. When the prana is able to move around freely in the system, that also nourishes the health. So three ways you are actually getting benefit of the health. The food that you eat with the thought of the divine purifies you, so it nourishes health. The subtle prana actually nourishes the health. The more the freer movement of the prana in the system, the more healthy you are. And thirdly, what's the third one? Now I have to go back. Now remember the third one and message me. Now this is one way of knowing how alert you are. Suddenly you ask the question out of the blue, then you will be caught off guard. The third one is the quality of moderation that you have incorporated into the food intake. So you see that there are many people who are healthy for a long time into their old age. And one of the simple qualities that they incorporate into their food intake is moderation. In fact, when we lose this quality of moderation in our food intake, we are inviting illness. Okay. So when we incorporate moderation in everything that we do, obviously it's an outshoot of our spiritual growth also. Also at the same time, it nourishes spiritual growth also. They work in like on one another. The more you incorporate moderation, the better the spiritual growth. The better the spiritual growth, more the moderation that you can actually grasp and utilize. Okay. So three things which nourishes the health. Somebody repeat. Three people can say one point each.
Moderation,
That's the last one. Easiest thing. That's called as answering by recent memory.
prana,
The subtle prana.
subtle prana,
Third one.
the prayer,
This is a typical thing that we in psychology. That we repeat the last one. Then in the reverse order we repeat. And you don't repeat it from the first to third. We repeat it from 3 to 1. That's what you are doing naturally. Last one was moderation. Second one was the prana that I said. What is the first one then? This is typically human mind at work. And this is normal. So you should be happy. So the doctor is giving you the certificate of normalcy. The food that you eat with the thought of the divine
that's
itself
what
purifies you.
I said prayer.
Oh, you say no, not prayer. We are talking about food. Don't take away the food.
Okay.
The food that you eat in the thought of the divine itself purifies you. That's the first one. Then the push of the thought, push from the thought actually makes the prana work. And whenever the prana is free flowing, it actually nourishes health. Second one. And third one is moderation. You can eat anything, no problem, but you should always be aware of the moderation. So if you like bakri, you cannot have 10 or 12 jolad rotis. You can have 2 or 3. That's okay. But if you eat 10 or 12, then that's not going to be nourishing your health. You might enjoy it. You might feel very satisfied with it. And your stomach might also be in a position to digest it. But you are now gone out of moderation. When you go out of moderation, that can actually cause ill health. Okay, so shall we stop here now? So the next part we shall cover tomorrow. So that will cover maxim 8 and then maxim 9. Okay, hopefully by middle of next week we should have finished the maxims. Then we'll move on to the next one. So, but this is a very, very important thing that we spoke about today. So, whatever intake that you give to the body in terms of food or liquid, solid or liquid, make sure that you take it with the thought of the divine. It should become your second nature. Okay?
So what it is, the thought of divine means what?
Sorry?
Thought of divine you mentioned, right? Means what? Like what we need to do.
You can do it in multiple ways. Being thankful to the divine while you are having the food is one way. Being grateful to the divine is another way. Having the thought of the master in your mind while eating food, master himself or the divine itself is eating the food. So when you eat the food, you should have the thought that ನೀನು ನಿನಗೋಸ್ಕರನೇ ನಿನ್ನ ಮೂಲಕನೇ ತಿಂತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ. So you are now telling the divine, you are eating the food for your own sake, by your own means. When you do this, where are you? We are nowhere in the picture. In other words, you remember the consciousness we speak about the I consciousness, the we consciousness, and the you consciousness. And then we go beyond all these three levels of consciousness. By having the thought when you eat the food that you are eating the food, that means the divine itself is eating the food by itself through its own means. Then there is no question of I or we there. You directly jump to the level of the you consciousness, the thought of the divinity. And what is there beyond the you consciousness? Only central region. That's all. That's how fast we can actually progress if we utilize this. So ನೀನು ನಿನಗೋಸ್ಕರ ನಿನ್ನ ಮೂಲಕನೇ ತಿಂತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ, ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳೋದಾಯ್ತು ಅಂದ್ರೆ. In that way, you are actually removing yourself out of this whole equation. Then you see the magic of that working. So there are, when we say have the thought of the divine, you can have it in multiple ways, but this is one of the best ways where you remove yourself. ನೀನು ನಿನಗೋಸ್ಕರ ನಿನ್ನ ಮೂಲಕನೇ ತಿಂತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ, ಎಲ್ಲವೂ ನಿನ್ನಿಂದನೇ. Everything is because of you only. When you have that particular thought, it becomes very easy. Now Gopal Krishna is thinking and he's feeling very happy.